I've kind of been playing around in my head, like what level can JK actually get to this season, and what level can he get to, overall as a player? Because he's obviously supremely talented, but where do we actually view him? And obviously we think he's going to take a jump here, but where does that actually lead to?
Yeah, as far as this year, what's the ceiling we can expect from this year? Like, I mean, he's shown potential to someday be an all-star. The way the roster is constructed, it's going to keep him from ever becoming an all-star in the short term. Like, he's just not going to get the opportunity
Mm.
unless he plays himself into that. Like, that's what Draymond did when David Lee went down in 2014. He played himself until he was invaluable and played himself into becoming an all-star. Could that happen with Kuminga? Maybe. That might be overly optimistic, but I think the defense he showed towards the second half of last year like made me really optimistic. I don't blame Kerr for taking him out of the rotation in the playoffs. I kind of can see how he was the odd man out in the crunch, but what I saw last year leads me to believe like his defense will be good. He looked good in the preseason. I mean, when you give him the ball in the preseason, he's scoring. Who knows if that will last in the regular season? But yeah, we can expect him to be like a 15 point per game scorer off the bench. That would be like amazing. So we'll see.
I actually, I think someone, I read a tweet earlier, and I can't remember who it was, but I think it was someone somewhat credible who was actually kind of pushing a Jonathan Kuminga sixth man case this season. I don't think that'll be the case purely because he's not actually necessarily going to be the sixth man, given you're going to have one of Chris Paul or Kevon Looney. I mean, if they do start Paul and Looney comes off the bench, I just like could Kuminga actually average more minutes than Loon? Maybe I think Kuminga might actually average more minutes than Loon just generally, even if Loon
I would hope
starts. I
he
mean,
does. Yeah.
yeah, I like Loon will probably play 20, half a game, maybe like 24 minutes. I think Kuminga can get to 25 plus minutes. He averaged 21 last season. I think that would be a realistic goal because if Steve's putting the trust in him to play 25 plus minutes, and obviously he's producing a consistent enough basis to be able to do that. Obviously, like first of all, we just need like a nightly rotation role, right? Like even listening to some of the Warriors plus minus podcasts from a few weeks ago, and they were even talking about is Kuminga the seventh man in the rotation or is he the 10th man in the rotation? Because if he has a poor start to the season, then all of a sudden Steve looks at Moody, Payton, Saric as more trustworthy options, and then all of a sudden Jonathan Kuminga is back to the 10th man in the rotation, and he's having nights where he's playing 8 minutes, and then other nights where he might be playing 16, 17. So it is important that he has a really strong start to the season. Obviously, the first preseason game is a good starting point to that. But, it goes from nightly rotation role. The big thing for me, I think, is by, midway through the season, latter end of the season, is he a potential closer? And in that article I spoke about in regard to, players that could be impacted, Andrew Wiggins was one for mine. Now, at the moment, I think, Jonathan Kuminga is more of a 4 than a 3. But in saying that, I think Wiggins will play a whole lot at the 4, with Dre at the 5 this season. So they're kind of positionally similar. And also with the way that JK has shot the ball late last season and, shot 4 of 8 in the preseason game against the Lakers, the shooting is coming along to the point where maybe you could play him at the 3 a little bit. We'll wait and see what happens. But is there a point where there's a game in the middle of the season and Andrew Wiggins is readily available, played 25 minutes, ready to come back in, and Steve actually says no, like JK's got it tonight, and Jonathan Kuminga closes lineups over Andrew Wiggins, or is whether it's Wiggins or someone else, like is that's what I'm looking at. Is he a potential closer on this team? Not every night, but on nights when he certainly has it. We saw that a bit, like he was closing games last season, but that was primarily when Wiggins was out of the lineup. And then, Wiggs comes back from his long absence at the start of the playoffs, and all of a sudden JK is entirely out of the rotation. So that's going to be the interesting thing for me, whether he can be in a closing lineup potentially every now and again.
I think that'll happen at some point. Like the regular season you'll see everything at some point.
Yeah.
If he can space the floor, he's much more playable alongside Draymond in those closing lineups. So that's a good sign that he's shooting well. And his defense needs to continue the progression we saw at the end of last year. He has to prove that he can guard like the opposing 4 or 3.
Mm.
If not, he won't see many closing lineups. I don't think. We'll see.
No. Yeah, look, his defense is. I still think he's a better like individual defender. He's almost an alternative to GP2 in terms of you actually kind of want him on the primary ball handler. Like I've seen you see him guard Doncic and Tatum kind of at times, and he actually LeBron, like he can like physically, he's obviously incredibly athletic. He's got the size. It's more the off-ball stuff, which I think Steve Kerr, has his issues with, and the Warriors have their issues with. And even on Saturday against, the Lakers in that opening preseason game, there were times where he kind of just roams around off the ball and, isn't fully engaged kind of thing, and can make mistakes in terms of, defensive rotations and stuff like that. So that'll probably be the biggest thing, rather than just his kind of one-on-one individual defending, because I think, as young as he is, he's literally only turned 21 years old. He's already shown that he's pretty capable as a one-on-one defender. It's more the off-ball stuff. Can he become like, when he's roaming off the ball, can he become a help defender like Giannis? We know Giannis is so good in those. Sorry, I've got a very dry voice at this time of the morning. Can he become like Giannis, where, Giannis, the Milwaukee don't want him guarding, the primary ball handler or whatnot, because they want him as a roamer who can be a great help defender.